Hey guys, my name is Matthew, and I had the opportunity to interview Spencer Coursen about his new book, The Safety Trap. I really recommend the book. The interview is packed full of information, and it's just perfect for whetting your appetite for the book itself. The book is excellent. I recommend you go pick it up and read it. It could change your life, and it might even save your life. Let's get right into the interview. Awesome. Well, Spencer, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad to have you on. Just really excited about your book that's coming out. Spencer's written The Safety Trap, which comes out on Tuesday, May 18th. We're really excited for that. Go buy a copy. This is a book that I think pretty much anyone could get something from. We could easily the uses of this book are really big, whether you're an individual or a business or you're running a business or, I mean, everyone is worried about safety, aren't they? So thank you so much for joining us, Spencer.
Hey, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Cool. Well, go ahead and I guess, can you tell us a little bit about the safety trap? Who is this written for? Who benefits the most from this book?
Sure. My name is Spencer Coursen. I have a security consulting firm known as Coursen Security Group, and we specialize in threat management. And I wrote a book called The Safety Trap, which is a turn of phrase that I came up with a few years ago to explain to my clients about how we are most at risk when we feel most safe. I had identified these like 15 or 16 quote unquote safety traps, everything from avoidance to false authority to overconfidence to shirking responsibility. And what I wanted to do was kind of just distill all of the ways that we kind of allow our own false sense of security to get us into trouble. And I wanted this book to just be, I wanted to take some real world examples and explain what happened, how it was allowed to happen, and then provide some very practical strategies that will help you to keep it from happening to you. And this is really I don't want to say it's like a how-to guide, but it's kind of like a come for the story, but stay for the lesson. And it's all of, it's called, I think the tagline on the book is a security expert's secrets for staying safe in a dangerous world. But really, it's just about awareness plus preparation equals safety. What are the most realistic risks I'm most likely to face? And then what are the most practical safeguards I can put into place to keep that risk from ever rising to become a reality?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you mentioned a little bit about your credentials already, but what qualifies you to write a book on safety? Like what have you done in your career? What does that kind of look like? Would you call yourself a safety expert?
I would call myself a threat management expert.
Yeah.
When you say, I kind of talk about this in the book. When people say, I want to be a security expert, it's kind of like saying you want to be a medical expert, right? It's like, well, there are no medical experts. There are doctors, and then there are doctors who specialize, but you wouldn't go to, a cardiologist if you had a broken ankle. You would go to like an orthopedic, who's someone who specializes in that very specific category. I specialize in threat management. So I help good people to make bad things better, whether that is to go in and look at their businesses or their lifestyle or how they're bringing something new to marketplace, to identify the most inherent risks that are most likely to be exploited by some bad guys. Or if you're a public figure and you're being stalked or inappropriately pursued, or if you're the CEO of a business and you're going through some layoffs, or maybe there's some kind of like industrial espionage going on that you're worried about your safety and the safety of your employees. That's what I specialize in, and that experience comes from I spent about 5 years in the Army, combat veteran, served over in Afghanistan. And then when I got out, I went to work for the government. I was a specially deputized U.S. Marshal under the State Department, and I was doing diplomatic security work. And then after that, I was working for Gavin de Becker and Associates, which is widely considered to be the Secret Service of the private sector. So what my global experience really provided was a way for me to take the experiences of the military, the experiences of the government, and the experiences of the private and public sector, so that I could tailor design a solution to my client's individual needs. And what I realized was that, not everyone is going to have the luxury of having their own protective detail, but every single one of us deserves to be protected. And what I wanted to do was take that skill set that had been readily available to that top 1% and make it much more readily available to the other 99, so that absolutely everyone from the second grader to the CEO could pick up this book and learn some very effective ways to help them succeed in staying safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I really loved how this book was really, it was manageable. I was actually involved in risk management at a camp for a few years, and that was kind of leading in that. So I've read lots of manuals and risk management and security type books, and most of them have the problem where they're just not readable. They're pretty dry, and what even the ones that are kind of readable, they're not written very well. So I really appreciate it. This book was one that I think, like you said, anyone, a second grader through to a CEO, could pick up the book, read it, and get something out of it, because it really applies to so many different people and so many different types of situations. So really,
well, I appreciate that, and I think there are a lot of really good books out there. I mean, I always, as a writer, you never want to say someone else is a bad writer, because someone else is going to say you're a bad writer. But what I will say that with a lot of the books that are out there is that they tend to focus on what to do after something has happened. They don't focus on what can you do to prevent that bad thing from happening. And, I work with a lot of, top crisis management people. And the number one takeaway they always say about crisis management: best way to manage a crisis, don't get into a crisis.
yeah,
So when people come up to me and they say, well, listen, like if I'm bound and handcuffed in the back of a trunk, how do I get out of it? I'm like, well, listen, there's probably 15 steps where a better decision could have been made before you wound up in the back of a trunk. So let's reverse plan how you got up, because you didn't just go to bed one night and then wake up in the morning and you're in the back of a trunk, right? Like maybe you saw someone who was, down the block and didn't really feel right, but you didn't do anything about it. You avoided dealing with it, or you shirked that responsibility, or you were overconfident that you could deal with it when the time came. And then they got closer and you felt more uneasy. And then as they engaged you in a conversation, you saw a van that was also suspicious. And all this time you're just negotiating against your own instincts. Let's stop doing that. And at that very first pre-incident indicator, take the most corrective action to help you ensure your safety.
yeah,
Let's prevent the problem instead of, because even as a society, I think we're like over reliant on how effective we are, whether that be school shootings or crime or, whatever. Like we'll give the police officers, better tactical gear, and we'll give the fire trucks, bigger tanks to hold more water, and we'll give the ambulance a faster engine so they can get people to the hospital faster. But those are all how to mitigate the impact once the crisis has risen. What I am trying to do is let's be a little more aware, and so we can be a little more prepared so that we can prevent that bad thing from happening in the first place.
yeah. And the other thing I liked, and you're hinting at this now, is that instead of thinking of safety as someone else's concern, the book overwhelmingly, I felt like, is pointing to actually you should be concerned with your own safety and your family's safety, and it's a priority that you personally need to kind of take for yourself.
Absolutely. Everyday safety requires the participation of everyone. The reality is that we no longer can afford to live in a world where we simply hope that nothing will happen and then solely rely on the first responders to save us once something does. Everyday safety requires the participation of everyone. And all most of us really need is a healthy sense of skepticism and a moderate dose of vigilance. And those two things are a very small price to pay for the liberties and the freedoms which flow so freely from peace.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I would love to take a minute and kind of look through a couple of these kind of things.
Yeah, let's do it.
So one of them that I thought was really interesting, this struck me, was you were talking about the difference between anxiety and anxiousness. And kind of you put a definition there, which was basically, anxiety, you can tell it's anxiety as opposed to anxiousness. Because when you're just anxious, then once you kind of start doing whatever it is, like if you're giving a speech or you're doing whatever, once you hit your flow state, once you've faced that fear, then the feelings all kind of fade away. You're no longer so nervous. Your heart rate goes down, all those types of things. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Why is it so
Absolutely. So the more I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say you go to IKEA and you buy yourself, you see that new dresser because your girlfriend's coming over to visit she's coming over to your house, and you want to have this nice dresser in your bedroom for when she comes over. So on Monday or Sunday night, you go to IKEA and you see this really cool dresser, and then you get home and you look at the instructions, which are like this like Ouija board of hieroglyphic interpretation. And then you look at this just pile of debris that's been dumped out of the box on the floor. And you're like, how on God's earth am I going to turn this into that? And so that would be some anxiousness. You're like, I don't know if I have the time. I don't know if it's going to look right. What if I break it? What if I do this? What if I do that? But if you just take your time and you start small and build strong, and you just start going, okay, I'm going to put this piece into this piece. Got it. Next, I'm going to put that piece into this piece. Got it. And then as you just do that, it's kind of like when you start, if you were like to dump a jigsaw puzzle out on the table, at first glance, it's just chaos and confusion. But then you're like, okay, well, these are the edges. I can see some red. I can see some blue. The more you start to put those pieces together, the more comfortable you get in your own skill set about, okay, I know what I'm doing. This is good. I can get this. I can accomplish this. But if you did not do that and you were like, oh, I could never do this. And then Tuesday comes and then Wednesday comes and, your girlfriend's like, how's the place looking? I can't wait to see. And you're like, oh man, I got to build that dresser. Now that initial anxiousness is just building up into anxiety. And so instead of taking where you would have had 5 days to complete this tasking, now you only have 2 days to complete this tasking. And the more we do this same pattern in our everyday lives, whether it be, anytime we choose to ignore today's concerns, we're almost inevitably forcing ourselves to confront tomorrow's crisis. But if we can just overcome that just uneasiness, that anxiousness, because none of us, no one fears that which they know well. But we didn't, wake up one day like we weren't born knowing how to walk. Like we had to learn. We had to be comfortable stumbling. We had to be comfortable falling. But the more we just adopt that, work, sweat, win type mindset, the more we expose ourselves and overcome that anxiousness to those things which may make us feel not unsafe, but may just make us feel uneasy. Those are all things that will just over the course of our lives, over the course of days, weeks, months, years, and a lifetime, keep adding takeaways and skill sets and know-how and insights and perspective and vantage points that will be as malleable and as interpretable and as employable into a vast majority of life's most unpredictable moments. But the more we participate in our own protection, the safer we will be and the more confident we will be about participating in those things of which we are most unfamiliar, but which will ultimately help us to succeed in staying safe.
Yeah, so that it's so important for us to face our fears, to jump in and take that safety, kind of head on and make that a habit in our lives to continue doing that.
Yeah, everyone thinks that like courage is going to come before the first step, but the courage doesn't actually come until you choose to take that first step. It's like it's like the courage comes after you jump off the board, not before. But once you realize you're not going to die, then you can't wait to do it all over again.
Yes. Yeah. I always tell my daughter that bravery isn't about doing something because you're not scared. Bravery is about doing it when you're scared. You can't be brave.
That's the only time you can be brave.
Yeah. Very cool. Can you tell me a little bit about, I think this is so pertinent to the world that we're living in right now, the 3 types of false authority that you talk about
Yeah, absolutely. So I go into, false authority, there's a whole chapter on false authority in the book, and false authority is a really, so you have, how do I explain false authority? False authority is when someone who is a subject matter in one thing, but may not be a subject matter in another thing, but they give you their opinion on that thing. But so let me give you, I'm a big Joe Rogan fan, and Joe Rogan is a comedian, and Joe Rogan's a lot of fun. But like Joe Rogan's not an astrophysicist, right? But Neil deGrasse Tyson is. So if Joe Rogan is talking to another comedian about like how comets work in space, maybe I'm not going to take Joe Rogan and the other comedians perspective as fact. But if Neil deGrasse Tyson is on, who's like the world's most renowned astrophysicist, and he's telling me about like how the chemtrails of comets work, I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. But then if Neil deGrasse Tyson starts going into like having a debate with Joe Rogan about like what the best, what the most street legal car is. Okay, well, now that's not Neil deGrasse Tyson's area of expertise. That's his opinion.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between like I think there's the stat I quote in the book is that like 85% of Americans can't distinguish fact from opinion, which
Yeah.
is concerning. So in false authority, there's three kinds of false authority. There's the false authority with questionable credentials. So that would be like, hey, these crystals, can heal you, and I know that they can heal you because I've healed other people with these crystals. And so and I'm not saying that like I don't have the expertise to say if crystals work or not, but I do know that like correlation isn't always causation. So just because you had these crystals, which may have like given you may have helped you to feel like a placebo effect, but you were also like taking your vitamins and eating well and working out. It may have been the vitamins and taking your vitamins and working out much more than it was the crystals that helped you to feel better. Another one may be the irrelevant credentials, and that would be the Neil deGrasse Tyson example, where he was talking about the astrophysics of everything, but maybe not necessarily about the auto mechanics of things. And then, of course, you have the people who have no credentials, which are just, someone who's just, well, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. Like, just because you read a script about like how to perform a surgery, or, like George Clooney was probably like the coolest doctor to ever portray a medical professional on television. But if I was in a car accident, I would not want George Clooney to work on me, right? Because that's not his area of expertise. Just because he played a doctor on TV does not mean he has any credentials in that realm. And I think when people start, whether their sole source of news is Facebook, or their sole source of news is The Daily Show, or their sole source of news is, like an on-air podcast read. Like, we have to be very careful that the information we're taking in is the right kind of information. And when in doubt, always keep in mind that in order to understand something fully, you should be able to passionately advocate for both sides equally. Because I think it's very easy to have your ideology get tied to your identity. But there is duality within all of this. You can be anti-mask and be pro-vaccine. Just because you are anti-mask doesn't mean you're anti-vaccine. You can be pro-life and also be pro-capital punishment. You can be pro-gun, but I mean, there's a million variables, and each and everyone's outlook is just as individualized as we are as individuals. And so whenever you're, listen, if I'm in a ballpark and I give the stadium guy my ticket, I absolutely trust him to tell me which section my seat is in. But if there was an active shooter event, I'm not sure I should trust that guy to tell me like where the safest place for me to go is, or where the nearest safe haven is, or where the next trauma center is, because just because he's wearing a security jacket and his role was to tell me where my seat is and make sure I had a ticket before coming in, does not mean that he is well trained in mass casualty evacuation. And I think we also get into trouble with this in schools. Like, both of my parents were excellent educators when they were teaching. They're both retired now, but they can't be expected to keep kids safe. They're not trained protectors. That's not their job, which is why, going back to what we were talking about before, so many of these school plans put an emphasis on trying to stop the active shooter after it has happened, rather than giving those who are hurting the attention and the care they need before that bad thing happens. And what almost always happens is those gunshots are really just the emotional fragility of the emotionally burdened going, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
That was a long answer to a very short question. I'm sorry.
No, that was so helpful, because I really do feel like this is so much an issue that we deal with. And you brought up some of the issues that people are dealing with right now with authority, as far as, COVID and masks and pro-gun, and, who do we trust? So I guess that's a question for you that's kind of related, is how do you know that someone is a true authority? Like, how can you kind of make that determination?
You want to surround yourself with intelligent people that disagree with you. You want to try to get out of your echo chamber. You want to try not get your news. You don't want your news sources to be confirming what you believe. You want your news sources to be challenging what you believe. Because if you are listening to Tucker Carlson, then you should also be listening to Pod Save America. And if you're a big fan of Pod Save America, then you should also be listening to Tucker Carlson, because you want to get both sides of the issue. If you're going to listen to Rachel Maddow, you should also listen to, I don't know, Glenn Beck. You want to be able to get both sides of, you want to see where people are coming from. Okay. Because what you're going to find is, as you're listening to both sides, oh, okay, they're telling their side of this story, and this person is telling their side of the story, but they're both intentionally leaving out very specific, nuances to support their agenda. And you have to keep in mind, like, when people are on TV or when people are on media, they're beholden to the advertisers that are promoting that show much more than they are. So I do trust podcasts more, because I think a lot of those people are, of their own, volition, and they're not like under some kind of corporate umbrella. They don't have a producer behind them saying, hey, we need to hit this next 5-minute mark for the Mercedes commercial. But, I think as much information as possible is always the best course of action. And you want to say, anytime you believe one thing, you want to actively try to disprove it. So just because you hear something, or you see something on Facebook, or you read something on Twitter, and you want it to be true, you should actively try to disprove it. Because the more you try to disprove it, the more you can be like, oh, okay, well, there's like 10 articles here and they're all saying something different. Which one should I believe? There was this great billboard in New York years ago. And I don't remember who it was for, but it was basically, there was like a corner building, and on one side of the building was a soldier. So there was this was like in the middle of, like, it was either the Afghan or the Iraqi war, but the prisoner was like, had his hands tied behind his back and was being given water. And on the one side of the building, all you saw was the soldier pointing a gun at the POW's head. And if you saw it from the other side, you saw the soldier giving the POW water. But if you saw the whole thing, what you saw was the soldier giving the bad guy water, or not the POW water, while the other soldier just ensured everyone's safety. And the overriding takeaway was, listen, even if you are a prisoner of war, we are going to still take care of you, but that's not going to come at the cost of our soldier safety. But if you only saw one side or the other, you could be like, we're in the take no prisoners business, or we're in the, don't fear us because we're going to take care of you business. When really it's about, you should fear us and we're going to take care of you, but we're not going to do so at a risk to our own safety. You know what I mean? So you need to see both sides so that you can understand the totality of circumstance to whatever is being told, because there is a big difference between someone telling you a story and someone selling you a story.
Yeah, and I think this, not this isn't necessarily a safety issue, but this is where so much of the division in our country is coming from, is people's inability to see the perspective of the other side. Where I think we're a lot closer than we actually think we are on most issues. We probably agree 90% of the way on most issues on either side of the political spectrum and whatever else.
Right. Well, because so much of there is no nuance to social media. You know what I mean? Because it isn't. You just asked me a rather simple question, and it took me a good 5 minutes to explain to you with context the point I was trying to make. I can't dumb that down into 180 characters on Twitter. And here's the thing: if I go, well, you're wrong to believe that, people are going to be, the people who believe that when I say I'm wrong to believe that, are going to like it and retweet it and whatever. And the people who are on the other side are going to be like, no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And those people, so you get into this like tribal mentality, because outrage, the algorithm for outrage is very profitable. And unfortunately, that's just not real life. I mean, have you ever seen that, the video where like the two dogs are on the other side of each other's fence? And then then the fence opens and the dogs are like, oh, hey, how are you? It's good to meet you. And then the fence closes, like, woof, 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 woof. And then the fence like slides open and goes, oh, hey, how are you, man? You want to go play? And then the fence goes, woof, 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 woof. It's like, that's the social media, divide. Yeah. If the fence is there, we're willing to be mean, trite, and offensive to one another. But as soon as the opportunity for them to punch us in our nose is reintroduced into the dynamic, we become much more polite.
Yeah. Well, and you actually talk about this in the book about, why is it important not to overshare on social media? And you list, of course, kind of the obvious thing of like, don't announce when you're going on vacation because then anyone on your group will know that you're going on vacation. But there's more to it than even that. You talk about why we should be kind on social media and why oversharing, like diary entries or whatever, it can be dangerous. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The average person has no idea how much personal information they share in a 6-month period. And whether that be, hey, it's my birthday today, or, my dog died. It reminds me of my first dog whose name was Lucy, because now you're just basically giving everyone your password questions for, reauthorization to change a password. And listen, here's the thing. It's really important to understand that oversharing information is not going to be the reason you are targeted, but but that information will absolutely be used for those who want to target you. So why are you going to it's kind of like saying, I'm never expecting to be stalked, but I also don't want to put all the information out online in case I do get a stalker that they know exactly how to stalk me. You know what I mean? It's just about it's that participating in your own, if you're going to put things out, put it in a story or put it in something that's only going to be there for a short amount of time and then disappear. Or if you're going to, post the vacation photos, post them after you get back. Or no one needs to know what you're doing day to day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. And when you see the public figures doing it, it's not real. It's curated. It's crafted. There's a production team and a PR team and everyone else, and they have photos and videos that were taken 3 or 4 days before that show what a day in the life looks like. But when that's actually posted, they're sitting at home in bed, giving their dog a bath. So it's social media is not real life. It's just not. And the more that we can get away from trying to think that it is, the safer we'll all be.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and yeah, and I think that is what you pointed to with celebrities when people think, oh, this is actually how they live their lives. Like you mentioned, it's just ridiculous. There's a production team, and there's dozens of people who are behind doing this and retouching the photos and doing all this stuff, and it's so
Right.
different.
When you see that even in my job, it's very easy to find that one moment, that fraction of a second that was captured in time, where you're with the client on the red carpet, at the movie premiere, and the James Bond logo's in the background, and it's a cool action shot. But that is one fraction of a second of a 6-month media tour that was late nights and early mornings and very little sleep and very long hours and arduous schedules and planning and pre-planning and managing threats and managing expectations. And you don't see all of that. All you saw was the one cool photo and said, oh, I want to do that. Or even if you just see, the swimsuit model who's on the beach with the perfect figure, and what you don't see is the 6 months of rigorous training and strict diet. And or I was watching the UFC fight last night. Those guys are in the cage just shredded gladiators, but they don't walk around looking like that when they're in training camp. Or maybe they go to training camp so they can get into that shape for that 6 weeks before the fight, then hopefully they win, and then they have to let their body recover and heal and get back to normal. So it's just very important that everyone understand that, like I said before, when you see that stuff, you're being sold a story, because telling you the story would be about all of the arduous times and sacrifice and late nights and early mornings and long hours that led up to that one particular moment that happened to be frozen in time. And then was edited and curated and retouched and perfected so that it could be presented to the masses to promote a book or a movie or a TV show or a new perfume.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let me ask you one more question. I know kind of want to make sure we're in the right time here, but I want to ask you about the idea of alarm fatigue, because I feel like that is a place, being this far into COVID
Yeah.
now, and I feel like a lot of people are really kind of struggling with this idea of alarm fatigue. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how can we kind of combat some of that fatigue?
Sure. So alarm fatigue is when you get so many alarms that um, you don't pay attention to any of them. I don't know when the last time anyone was in a casino was, but when you're in a casino, all you hear is like all those bells and ding 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 ding, and because what they're trying to do is get you to come into the casino because you want to play the slots and you're hoping to hear that alarm. But after you sit at like a blackjack table for 5-10 minutes, like you just go noise deaf. You don't hear those alarms at all. And even like when you see like the expectation of like most people who actually do win the slots or do hit blackjack or do like they're so in shock because it's not like they heard the sounds or the alerts or whatever that told them they won. They're still like in a state of disbelief when they do. And what we find is like that same thing happens to us when maybe it's like our home security notifications, because you install your cameras and you get all those like push notifications like, oh, my mailman, oh, it's my dog, oh, look, the kids are home from school, oh, it's my Amazon Prime is here, or the thing I ordered from wherever just got delivered. This is great. But after like a couple of days, you're like, all right, that's enough. You don't even read them. You just immediately dismiss them. But maybe that one was the one that was like the bad guy breaking into your house that you needed to call the police for, or that you needed to, whatever. So it's like I always ask everyone, just take one day and just zero everything out. No alerts at all. Not your sports scores, not whatever, or at least have them batched so that they are in fetch mode, so that you have to fetch those alerts and those like you don't need to know every time Tom Brady throws a pass. Like unless you're sitting there watching the game, like you don't need to know, or you don't need to know about the trade, or you don't need to know about the whatever, because every time you take yourself out of what you're doing, you are forcing yourself to then readjust and recalibrate, which adds to our anxiousness, which adds to our anxiety, because we're never allowing ourselves to be present in any one particular moment. And the more we are distracted by the everyday, the more we allow ourselves to be distracted by the things that don't matter, the less we are aware of the things that do. And just because we feel safe in knowing that we're on top of all of these other things, that false sense of security can lead to us not knowing what's going on in our own world, which means that we're not going to see, we don't stub our toes on the things we notice. We stub our toes on the things we don't. But it's not like that Lego on the floor just appeared out of nowhere, right? It was always there. You just didn't see it because you weren't expecting to see it. You weren't told to see it. You weren't warned to see it. And therefore you weren't expecting to. And the next thing you know, it's like, and now you've got a sore foot for the rest of the day. But if you had just been like present in your moment and where you were going and pay attention to your surroundings, just a little more mindful of your everyday activity, chances are you probably would have seen that Lego before you stepped on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that advice is so important. Our family actually does exactly that. We take 1 hour every day, a day every week, and a week every year where we turn off all of our electronics and just spend time in the moment. Because aside just from the safety aspects of it, it clears your mind of so many things. You're so much more productive, and you feel like you can actually get
It does.
done. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's so important.
That is my gym time. When I go every day at the gym, I love nothing more than that 90 minutes where I just hit the do not disturb on the phone. And I just headphones, music, sweat, surrender. And that 90 minutes is just ground, recenter, do what you need to get done. And everything else will wait. Like for 90 minutes, you can give yourself 90 minutes every day just to, zone out, zen, take care of your body, take care of your health, take care of your mind. And then as soon as that's done, get back out there and get after it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Spencer, thank you so much for sharing with us. I really
Matthew, this was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, everyone go pick up the safety trap. In addition to all the things we talked about here, you have like 15 safety traps that are really pertinent to people. In addition to that, you've got like 25 different steps for residential safety. And the book is just jam packed full of information. I think anyone can get something from this. Go pick it up because you guys are going to love this book and you're just going to learn so much of kind of the blind spots you have in your own life. So definitely recommend it.
Matthew, thank you again.